Hello guys and welcome to a new episode of Leubniz Lecture. This episode is part of my series about vanilla JavaScript, and today I want to talk about callbacks, promises, and the fetch API. So we want to start with callbacks, move on to promises then, and then we will talk about the fetch API and everything with the async and asynchronous fetching of data there. Okay guys, so don't waste any time, just go over to VS Code. I already prepared an index.html file here. Just give that some title. So we talk about callbacks, promises, and fetch today. So this should be our title here. So for the first demo that we do, we do not need anything inside our body. We just leave it as it is. We try to run the console here in our browser, just refresh this and it's fine. So the first thing I want to talk about is the callback, and therefore let's create a callback.js file, and we have to include this file here. So it's callback.js and the type is text/JavaScript. Good. The first thing I want to do here, I want to create an array of students. So the array here with the squared brackets, and in there some object literals. So we have, first of all, a name that will be John Doe, and we have some class name, and the class name is 2C. Then we add another student. So once again, our name, now it's, I don't know, Hazel Summer, and the class name is now 2D. Good. So these are our students. Let's console log them to see if that works. So it looks good. We have our students here, John Doe, Hazel Summer, 2C, 2D. Perfect. Okay. We have to simulate some things as we're not running on a real server here. So we have to simulate some kind of stuff there. And what I want to do here is the following. I want to create a function that writes the students to my HTML file, so all of the students. So therefore we just do a function and we name this write students here. And yeah, what does this do? We just have our output. So our output starts with an unordered list. Then we have our students. So for each of our students, we grab the student and the index here. So you can just add the second parameter as the index. And then we add this to our output. So we're using a template string here where we say li, so a list item. And inside the list item, we add our student, I did the wrong name here. So student.name. Good. That's it for the for each. And then finally, we need the closing UL here. So let's just try to do this, use the same codes everywhere. Good. Finally, we just do a document.body.inner HTML and set the output there. So this means this will be the only output that we will have. So if we just call this function, write students, so we see that it's just written to our HTML file. We have John Doe and Hazel Summer. So this seems to be working fine. That's great. So now we have a use case. We have a function create student. And let's imagine this function create student wants a student to be parsed. And what we do here, we push the student to our students here. And I now want to simulate in some way the way a server would act if we would push this to the server. So if this function would just write something to the server or grab data from the server or whatever. So usually we have a delay here, and therefore we do a set timeout. And in here, what we want to do is we want to run that push students, and to do this we wait 2 seconds. So it's 2000 milliseconds. So let's see what we do. We call the create student. So we want to create a new student. Let's use a new one here. So we want to have, what do we use? Oh, I'm just doing the wrong brackets here, sorry. Let's say name, it's Oliver Winter, as we have Hazel Summer. And then the class name will be 2A. After this, we use our write students method. So what do we expect as soon as I save this code now? We expect that something is printed to the console as we call create student here. We expect that John Doe, Hazel Summer, and Oliver Winter is printed to our HTML file. So let's save it. And what we see is still John Doe and Hazel Summer only. The question is what happened here? And the problem is the following. We call create student, and just after it's this rewrite the students. This means this is still working, interacting with our server, grabbing some data or whatever. And in the meanwhile, we are already writing the students array to the HTML file here. So what we want to achieve is we want to call write students as soon as create student is done. And therefore, we have to change our create student function in a way that we can somehow parse a callback function here. This means the callback function is just a reference to some function that we parse. And what we do in our create student is, as soon as the push is done or whatever interaction we do with our server, we call this method, whatever this callback method is. So we don't know what the callback method is, but whatever it is, we run it here. So we already get the error here because I didn't parse anything. But if I go to my create student function here to the call, and if I just parse my write students here, then this should work. And that's how it's working. Okay, so now we have John Doe, Hazel Summer, and Oliver Winter. So you see it takes some time. So if I reload the page, carefully look now, it's taking 2 seconds and then the whole thing is displayed. So we're using a callback here to ensure that as soon as the interaction with the server is done, our data is written to our HTML file. So this is how callbacks work. Okay, that's the first great thing, but now we continue with something that's kind of the same as a callback, but much more powerful, I would say. A little bit different, but we will see the difference in a minute. And what I'm talking about is a so-called promise. So we create a new JavaScript file. We call it promise.js. And first of all, I copy the students from here to there. And we also need to change the script tag here. So we need to include our promise.javascript file now. Okay, I also want to copy the right students function here. So this is also something we need there. Yeah, and what we will do is we will create our get student now. Create student now. So a new function, create student. So the same as before, but now we don't need our callback anymore because our function now returns a promise. So we create a new promise here, and this promise is what we return. So a promise always has some resolve and rechecked. So this means if everything's working fine, we have to call the resolve. And if there is some problem, if we have some errors, we have to call the rechecked. Once again, we want to simulate the server timeout with the set timeout function here. And now let's give it 2 seconds again. And we just do the following. We say students.push and we push the student. So that's what we do here. And basically, if we would interact with the server, whatever, there might be some error. For now, to simplify this, I just have an error flag here, and this error flag is set to false. So that's really just basic testing stuff right here. So if there is no error, we call resolve. And else, if there is an error, we call reject, and reject can have any parameter here. And I just write error, there was something not okay. So just a very easy error. So what we do here is we create a new promise, and if everything worked fine, we call resolve, and if we had a problem, we call the reject. So think of it like the callback before. So resolve and reject are two functions here. Okay, so let's try this out. We call our create student function down there, and we parse a new student with the name of Oliver Winter once again, and with a class name of 2A. So that's what we do here. So if we run this, nothing happens. So everything's fine, but we also don't see anything. But as this returns a promise, we can say .then. And whatever is inside .then is called if the resolve, so if everything was fine with the promise and the resolve is called there, because whatever we place in here is parsed in there and is called here. So we say write students here. So, and after 2 seconds, as soon everything worked fine, we get John Doe, Hazel Summer, Oliver Winter. So it's the same procedure as before, but now this looks kind of more structured and is a little bit more powerful. So we have to promise up there. Good. So let's try the following. We set the error flag to true now. So we are simulating that there is some error. So we run this and now we get an uncaught error in our promise. There was something not okay. So this is exactly the error that we defined here. So what shall we do if there is an error? We can just go after our .then and write a .catch. And then once again, whatever we place in here is called at that position here, and this string is parsed. So what we do is we get our parameter, we do a simple arrow function here with a console.log, and we just print the error to the console. And as soon as we do this, we see there is no error from the console, but our error message only. So our program didn't break, but we get the error message. And we could also just have call another function in there or do whatever we want. So this is how this works. And then there is some finally, and in this finally block, we can, for example, just say finally, get rid of all of this stuff here, call this, and now we see we get the error and finally is something that's always called. It's like the finally that we also have in Java using the try and catch blocks there. Okay, guys. So we had two things. We had the callbacks where we parse the function directly. And now we had a promise which handled this for us. So we are just parsing the resolve and the reject methods by using .then or .catch. So this is how that part worked. Okay, so now we're doing two more demos, and for the first demo that we do now, we just copy these two functions and our students. We create a new file, and this file is called async.js. Let's paste this in there, go to our index and change the JavaScript file to include. And now we are ready to go in here. Okay, what we had before when talking about the promises, this was some async stuff because we called this create student, and as soon as the 2 seconds were gone, we used the then and the catch and the finally to do something after the execution of create student. But the thing is, whatever code is after here, code is executed after create. So this is always executed as soon as create student is called. So we are not waiting for anything. So let's maybe show this in an example. After create, for this to check, we have to go this back again. So we have after create, and then we have the error. So this means whatever comes after create student is just executed immediately. So the code is not waiting. But by creating async functions, we can the rest of the program wait until we go on. So what we can do is, first of all, let's set the error flag back to false. And what we can do here, we create just another function, and this function is called do something. And inside there, we call await create student, and then we parse our new student. So we have the name, the Oliver Winter, and we have the class name to be 2A. So to make this await work, we have to make the function async. So in that way. And now inside this function, do something is waiting until create student is finished before doing something afterwards. And afterwards, we want to call write students. So we can have our call our do something here. And now it's waiting until create student is done to write the students. That's very important here. Please don't be confused. Here is executed immediately because the whole program is not an async function. But usually in that case, you can just create yourself a main function, put everything inside the main, and the main is async. This means then if you're using some await inside that main function, we're waiting here. So if I log this here is executed as soon as create student is done. This is very important. So await makes the whole code afterwards wait until it's done. And what we have to think of is what happens if there is an error, because if there is an error, we really get an uncalled error again here. And to resolve this, we can just do the same thing as in Java. We can just use a try and catch block here, where we catch our error and console log the error then. So let's do an intent here. So in that way. And if we do that, we get the error message and no uncalled error. So this is the way of doing error handling in async function using the await keyword here. So, and why is this important? Because whenever we are fetching something using the fetch API, this whole async stuff really makes sense. So we will come back to async in a minute, but before we do so, we go to fetch. So we have a look at the fetch API. So we create a new JavaScript file called fetch.js, and now we need some more code in our index.html file. So first of all, what we need is a button with the ID myButton1, where we say load text. And after this button, it's just 2 line breaks and then a div with the ID text. So once again, 2 line breaks, another button with the ID of myButton2, and there it says load JSON, and then once again a div with the text with the ID JSON here. Okay, so that's what we want to do. And now we are ready to load our first data. To do so, I created a sample txt file, text file, where I just have some sample text in there. And this is what we want to fetch now. So to do this, we create a function called getText. And after this, we do a query selector to myButton1, and there we say add event listener. We're waiting for a click listener, and as soon as this is clicked, we want to call the getText. So let's see if this works. If we click on load text, we get our getText here. Okay, fine. So this works. And what we want to do now is we want to use the fetch API. The fetch API can be used to grab data from APIs, from files, and so on. And we are doing this right now with a file. So we use fetch here. And the file we are grabbing from is the sample.txt, so the file that I just created. So important to know is that fetch returns a promise. So remember what a promise is. We have a reject and we have a reject and a resolve. And to do something on resolve, we have to call .then here. This is our promise in that case. And what we do is inside here, we have to create another function, and this function gets the response here. So the response is whatever is returned from the server. So let's console log this response here. So whenever we click on load text, we get our response. Just ignore the service worker. This is from live server, but this is how this response looks like. We have a response body, which is not shown yet. We have some headers. We have OK, so OK means true, status 200. And we have the status text here and URL, where the response came from. So everything seems to be okay, but where is our data? Where is our text? And to get our text, we can just say response.text. And if we do this now, we get a pending promise here. So this means our response.text returns another promise. We see the text in there already, but we cannot access it yet. And to access our text, we return the response.text here. And then after this function there, we have to call .then again, because this is returning our data. And with our data, we can just console log this here. And if we do so, we see that now we have I am a sample text file. So what happens? Once again, fetch returns a response, so a promise where we get the response, and then reconverting the response to the text or grabbing the text from the response again returns a promise which we catch with .then, and this gives us the data afterwards. So we can shorten this down a little bit by just replacing this function here with an arrow function and just returning res.text. So we get rid of all of this. Then we have the other then, we have data, and we want to print the data to the document, or to our HTML document. So we say document.querySelector #text.inner HTML equals data. So whatever is written there. I just see that I have a problem there somewhere. A bracket is missing. So if I click load text, it says I am some text file. Good. And very important, do not forget to catch the error if there is some. So we say error and then console.log the error. Good. So this is working fine now. We are using our fetch API at that point. The second thing I want to do is now I want to grab data from a server and load the JSON data. And therefore, first of all, I want to include Font Awesome. So if you don't know what Font Awesome is, you can check out my video about Font Awesome. And I'm including Font Awesome here at the beginning, just in that way. Good. So once again, another function. The function is called getJSON. So we're loading some JSON here. And we want to execute this as soon as we click on our load JSON button. We have the click event here, and then we want to run getJSON. We do just a simple console.log in here to see if this works, and yes, it works fine. Perfect. I want to use a special API, and to access this API, it's https JSON placeholder.typicode.com/ and then I think I want to do to-dos. So this is just a simple API somewhere in the internet from jsonplaceholder.typecode.com, and it gives us an array of to-dos. We have a user ID here, so referring to some user. We have an ID for the to-do. We have a title for the to-do, and we have a flag telling us if this to-do is already completed or not. Good. So first, let's use the fetch here. So how do we use the fetch? We just paste the API URL, that's this, in there. Then we say .then, remember the first promise. What do we do with the first promise? Rest.text was the version we used before, but now we're using text.json. This returns another promise where we have to say .then again, and then we can grab our data here. So let's console.log the data and see if this is working. And yes, it works. We see we get 200 to-dos, so a lot of to-dos here, but that's working fine. So what I want to do now is I want to use Font Awesome here to create some nice looking icons. So I create an icon for done. So if something is done, I want to use the icon FA solid, FA square dash check. Sorry. And the closing eye. And for the not done, I want to use FA solid, FA dash square dash X mark. So this is what I want to use. And to print the data to our web page, I do the following. I will define a new output. So the output is an H2 that says to-dos. So some kind of headline that we have. And afterwards, I'm doing a data dot for each. And in here, I'm grabbing my to-do. So whatever to-do is in there. And I want to say output plus equals template string again. I want to use a div. And inside this div, we have to-do dot completed, and if this is true, we use done, otherwise we use not done. Okay. Additionally, let's just do a blank there, and after the blank we're using to-do.title, and then we close the div. So important, where do I get these properties from? So completed and title. And this is always very important when working with APIs. You have to read the documentation or have a look at the data, because otherwise you won't know which one to use. So I used this title here, and I used the completed property there. So these are the ones that you can use. I would also be able to use user ID and ID, but I don't care about them right now. So after this is done, I'm just going to select my JSON data, say inner HTML here, and this is equal to the output. And if I click load JSON now, I should get some data in here. And I see a lot of interesting things here. So something's not okay with my data. And the question is, what can we do? So we see the first element that we had there is delectus out autumn. That's still working fine. Afterwards, we have this very long version here, but we have 2 x's, then we have 3 x's, then we have 4 x's, and so on. So something seems to be not correct. Let's check. What did we do wrong? We have our div, we have to do completed, we have done. Otherwise, we have not done. Let's see, something wrong up there. I'm not sure right now. FA solid, FA square check. So I forgot the closings there. So that was the error. Okay. So now it seems to be good. Yes, we have all our to-dos and we have an X or a tick depending on if this was completed or not. Very important at the end, don't forget to use the catch here to catch any error if there is some. This is very important to always think about errors because there can be any error at any time. So that's very important. Okay, and now I want to show you one more thing because this whole stuff that we do here can also be done using an async function. So we can use async function get to do's here. Then we just grab our first response by using the fetch that we do up here. So just copy that down. And remember, await means that every other code in this function waits until this is done. Then I'm grabbing the data once again, await res.json because the response.json returns another promise, and then we can console log our data. And if we do this right now, we see as soon as everything's done, we console log this. So this is how we can use the async function and the await with the fetch API. Okay guys, so this was now everything I wanted to show you in this video. We talked about callbacks and parsing callback functions. We talked about promises by having the resolve and reject functions that we can parse using the then and the catch. And then we talked about asynchronous execution of function and interacting with the server. And finally, I introduced the fetch API and showed you how to grab some text or how to grab some JSON data, both using promises and the async await keywords here. So both of these features are very important and very useful for you. Good. So guys, this is already the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're interested in more about programming or logic algorithms and so on, just feel free to have a look at my channel. Maybe you also want to subscribe it to get informed about new videos. If you liked this one here, just give it a like. I would be very happy about it. And otherwise, I would be happy to see you again in one of my other videos. So have a good day. See you. Bye.